Today, we will explain and show the process of photosynthesis. The study of photosynthesis began in 1771 with observations made by the English clergyman and scientist Joseph Priestley. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants use sunlight energy to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose and oxygen. This process takes place in two stages, the light-dependent reaction and the Calvin cycle. Both of these stages occur within an organelle of a plant cell called the chloroplast. Inside of the chloroplast are different components: the inner and outer membranes, the thylakoid, membrane, lumen, and stroma. Begin with the light-dependent reaction. The light-dependent reaction takes place within the thylakoid membrane of the chloroplast. Thylakoid membranes are in stacks inside the chloroplast. These stacks are called grana. Inside the thylakoid membranes are photosystems 1 and 2. These photosystems are protein complexes that act as light absorbers within the light-dependent reaction. Now, the initial reaction begins when sunlight strikes photosystem 2 and is absorbed. The sunlight absorbed excites the electrons in photosystem 2, causing them to move to form the electron transport chain. The electrons on that chain are then transported to photosystem 1. Now, photosystem 2 needs to replace its missing electrons, so water molecules get split and its electrons replace the missing ones. Now that the water is split, there is a leftover oxygen atom and hydrogen ions. As we know, plants make oxygen, and this is where that comes from. As the electrons travel through the electron transport chain, they actively transport hydrogen ions or protons into the thylakoid membrane against the concentration gradient. An enzyme called ATP synthase lets them passively diffuse out of the thylakoid. When they pass through it, ATP synthase spins and turns ADP into ATP energy. When the electrons reach photosystem 1 through the electron transport chain, they are coupled with a hydrogen ion and accepted by an NADP+ molecule. This effectively produces NADPH by reducing NADP+ into NADPH. ADP and NADPH get let out into the stroma of the chloroplast. This is where the Calvin cycle will begin. The Calvin cycle is the process that changes carbon dioxide into glucose. NADPH and ATP both play critical roles in the process of photosynthesis. ATP is used in the Calvin cycle to provide energy for the reaction, while NADPH is a carrier that donates its electrons and hydrogens. The Calvin cycle is split into three phases: Phase 1, carbon fixation; Phase 2, carbon dioxide reduction; and Phase 3, the regeneration of RUBP. Phase 1 starts with an enzyme called rubisco that takes in carbon dioxide and adds it to a 5-carbon compound called RUBP. This is called carbon fixation. This creates an unstable 6-carbon compound that immediately splits into two 3-carbon compounds called 3PG. In Phase 2, this 3PG gains energy from ATP, which is provided from the light-dependent reactions, and gets reduced by NADPH, also from the light-dependent reactions. This reaction converts it into G3P. Every 6 G3P molecules made, 1 leaves cycle and 5 move on to Phase 3. In the third phase, G3P gets turned back into the starting compound RUBP. 5 G3P molecules take the energy from ATP and convert into 3 RUBP molecules that gets recycled back into the cycle. This cycle needs to go around twice for 1 glucose molecule to be made. The glucose created by photosynthesis will become energy for the plant, enabling them to power cellular functions and build cell structures like cellulose. ADP and NADP+ are also created by the Calvin cycle. ADP is produced as a byproduct of G3P formation. NADP+ is produced when NADPH gives its electrons and hydrogen to reduce the 3PG into G3P, causing it to be chemically reduced to NADP+. These two products are then recycled back to the start of the light-dependent reaction, where they will then be powered back up as ATP and NADPH through the power of sunlight. The process of photosynthesis can happen differently in different plants. These are C3, C4, and CAM plants. C3 plants are the most common and make up 95% of all species of plants in the world. The problem with C3 plants is that they don't store water well in dry environments and will often die. To combat this problem, some species of plants have evolved and became C4 plants. C4 plants, carbon fixation in the Calvin cycle occur in different cells: the mesophyll cell and the bundle sheath cell. CAM plants also adapted to survive in arid environments. These plants open their stomata at night and take in CO2, and in the day they close their stomata to reduce water loss through transpiration. Both of these methods were adapted to conserve water.
We cannot fully understand photosynthesis without understanding the nature of light.
Light has a dual nature, so it is made up of both waves and particles. Photosynthesis uses both of these things to obtain their energy for the process. In the end, photosynthesis helps more than the plant. It helps the environment through removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, making the air cleaner and safer. Also, if the plants can grow, more animals can eat them and gain their energy. So basically, photosynthesis powers the plants that are the foundation of the food chain. Summarized, photosynthesis is a recurring process that provides nutrients for the plant to grow while also cleaning out air and starting the food chain.